Hey guys, tonight we are time traveling, but I need you to leave your romantic notions of the past behind. We're heading to the 19th century, specifically the Victorian era. And we're not going to a grand ball or a charming tea party. Not at first. No, we're diving straight into the deep end, into the very foundation of a proper lady's life, her underwear. We're going to explore the world of the corset, and not just by reading about it. You are, for all intents and purposes, about to be laced into one for the very first time. And a gentle warning, your modern, 21st century body, which is used to things like, breathing deeply and having its organs in their designated spots, might just stage a protest on day one. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, let me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. I love seeing where these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world outside your window is a symphony of muted greys and browns, punctuated by the sharp clatter of horses' hooves on cobblestones. A faint smell of coal smoke and damp wool hangs in the air. It's a world of immense progress and rigid structure. And you, a young woman on the cusp of entering society, are about to become intimately familiar with that structure. It starts not with rules of etiquette or a list of eligible bachelors, but with your own silhouette. Right now, your body is soft, natural. When you breathe, your belly expands. When you bend, you fold at the waist. These simple, biological truths are about to become liabilities. The pressure isn't a shout, it's a whisper. It's in the fashion plates that arrive with your mother's magazines, showcasing women with waists so impossibly tiny they look like a different species. Their torsos are long and stiff, their hips blooming out from that minuscule center point like a flower on a rigid stem. You see it in the way older women, your aunts and their friends, assess each other with a single, sweeping glance. Their eyes don't check for a kind smile or an intelligent gaze first, they check for a waist. A respectable, disciplined, tightly laced waist. This, you learn, is the primary visual cue of a lady. A thick or undefined waist suggests a life of physical labor, of bending and lifting. A wasp waist, however, broadcasted to the world that you were a creature of leisure, a delicate ornament whose only job was to be beautiful and, eventually, to manage a household. You've overheard the maids talking in hushed, half-admiring, half-horrified tones about the most extreme practitioners of this art. They call it tight lacing. They speak of women who sleep in their corsets, who gradually cinch their waists down to a reported 16 or even 15 inches of circumference smaller than most people's necks. This is one of those fascinating and slightly scary bits of information that isn't for polite conversation, a niche piece of knowledge in a world obsessed with appearances. For most women, the goal wasn't such an extreme, but the ideal was always there, dangling just out of reach, pushing everyone to cinch just a little bit tighter. Your mother has started giving you that look. It's a look of affectionate concern mixed with a steely resolve. Your childhood is over. The freedom of loose-fitting dresses and uninhibited movement is about to be packed away with your old toys. You are to be shaped, molded, made respectable, but why is it truly all for the men to attract a suitable husband who will see your tiny waist as a sign of delicacy and discipline, or is it for the other women a silent, vicious competition played out in hollow bone and steel, where the winner is the one who can endure the most discomfort for the sake of the perfect line under her dress? Historians are still debating this very point. Was the corset a tool of patriarchal oppression, a form of female-on-female social warfare? Or, and this is a more complex thought, a strange way for a woman to exert control over the one thing she truly owned, her own body, sculpting it into a living work of art, however painful the process. You don't have the luxury of this academic debate. For you, the reality is much more immediate. Tonight, as you lie in bed, you take a deep, satisfying breath, feeling your ribs and stomach expand without restriction. It feels like a farewell, because your mother said it this afternoon, her voice leaving no room for argument. Tomorrow, she announced, we are going to see the Corset. The word hangs in the air, both a promise and a threat. A new chapter of your life is beginning, and it will be defined by what you are about to wear. The morning arrives not with a gentle dawn, but with a sense of quiet, formal purpose. Your usual dress, the one with the comfortable, loose waist, feels like a costume you're re-wearing for the last time. Breakfast is a subdued affair. Your mother doesn't need to say anything. Her posture, ramrod straight, speaks volumes. You find yourself mimicking it, pulling your shoulders back, sucking in your stomach slightly. The training has already begun, even before the device itself has been introduced. The carriage ride is short, but every bump and sway on the cobblestones feels like a tick of a clock, counting down to your appointment. You pass shops selling bonnets and gloves, bakeries with sweet smells wafting out, but your destination is a discreet storefront on a respectable but not ostentatious street. The sign is simple. Elegant gold lettering on a dark painted window, Madame Du Bois. It sounds less like a shop and more like a specialist's office. You step inside, and the air changes. It's warm, and it smells of clean, starched cotton, a faint, dry scent of steel, and something else, a strange, slightly marine odor you can't quite place. It's the smell of hollow bone, or baleen, to be more precise, the key structural element, sitting in long, pale strips in wooden boxes behind the counter. The room is quiet, carpeted to muffle footsteps. There are no flounces or frivolous decorations here. It's a serious place of business. On discreet stands, several corsets are displayed like plaster torsos in an artist's studio. They are architectural, sculptural. They don't look like clothing, they look like equipment. Your eyes are drawn to the sheer number of seams, the intricate stitching, the formidable-looking metal busk down the front. A bell has chimed softly upon your entry, and from a back room emerges Madame Du Bois herself. She is not what you expected. She is not a soft, matronly seamstress. She is a technician, a woman in her 50s, perhaps, with her hair pulled back so tightly it seems to pull her eyes into a state of permanent, sharp focus, and her posture. It is impeccable. She doesn't have a waist, she has a geometric improbability. She moves with a stiff, gliding motion, her own body a testament to the power of her craft. She greets your mother with a nod of professional courtesy before her assessing gaze falls on you. You feel less like a customer and more like a block of marble about to be appraised by a sculptor. You are led into a small, private fitting room. It's warm and curtained, with a large mirror and a single, unforgiving wooden chair. If you would please undress to your chemise, Madame Du Bois says. It's a command, not a request. Your mother waits outside. You are alone with this stern architect of the female form. You fold your clothes neatly, your hands trembling slightly, standing there in your thin cotton shift. You have never felt so exposed, so shapeless. Madame Du Bois picks up a tape measure and a small, leather-bound notebook. Her hands are cool and dry. Stand straight, shoulders back, chin up. Then, the measuring begins. It is a far more intricate process than you could have ever imagined. It's not just bust, waist, hips. She measures you across the back, from shoulder to shoulder. She measures from the nape of your neck to your natural waist, from your armpit to your hip bone. She measures the circumference directly under your bust, at the narrowest part of your waist, and then several inches below it. She calls out the numbers in French accented English to a young assistant who has appeared silently at the door to transcribe them. Under bust, 28. Tail, 26. High hip, 34. It feels clinical, detached, as if she were cataloguing the dimensions of a piece of furniture. This was a little-known art from the Corset's diagnostic. They took dozens of measurements to create a perfect, bespoke fit, understanding that an off-the-shelf corset could cause pinching, chafing, or improper molding. This will be your first corset, she asks, her eyes not leaving their task. You nod, unable to find your voice. We will begin with a 4-introduction. It is important to season the corset properly. You will wear it for only 2 hours the first day, laced loosely, 4 hours the next, and so on. You do not conquer the corset in a day. You come to an understanding with it. She explains this as if she were teaching you to tame a wild animal. She shows you samples of fabric, a sturdy, unadorned cotton coatl for everyday wear, a blush pink satin for evenings, with a space for delicate embroidery. We will use German steel for the busk and the stays. It is most reliable. As you stand there, being measured and prodded like a prize heifer, a strange question forms in your mind. Is this woman an ally or an adversary on one hand? She is a skilled artisan, a successful businesswoman in a world where few women had such autonomy. She is providing a service that society has deemed essential for you, helping you achieve the required standard of beauty and respectability. But on the other hand, she is the direct instrument of your confinement. She is the one forging your cage. Historians still grapple with the legacy of the corset race, where they empowered female entrepreneurs, masters of a specialized and lucrative craft, simply responding to the demands of their clientele, or were they the primary enforcers of a physically punishing beauty standard, profiting from a system that literally reshaped women's bodies to fit a patriarchal ideal? The measuring is finished. Madame Dubois gives a satisfied nod. Your corset will be ready in 3 weeks' time. You get dressed, your familiar clothes feeling alien on your body. The simple act of pulling on your dress makes you hyper-aware of your own waist, your posture, the space you occupy. You leave the quiet, serious shop and step back out into the bustling street. The world looks the same, but you feel fundamentally different. A countdown has begun. In 3 weeks, you will return to collect your armor, your second skeleton, and your life as a lady will truly begin. The 3 weeks pass with a strange, slow-motion dread. Every deep breath you take, every time you slump your shoulders in a moment of fatigue, you feel a phantom pressure around your ribs. You are already subconsciously training for confinement. Finally, the day arrives. You return to the hushed, professional atmosphere of Madame Dubois's establishment. This time, there's a box waiting, tied with a simple ribbon. It feels surprisingly heavy. Back in the sitting room, you open it. There it is. Your corset. It lies nestled in tissue paper, looking even more formidable up close than the display models. It's made of the stiff, cream-colored coatl you chose, a fabric with a tight, herringbone weave designed to withstand immense strain. It smells new, a clean, starchy scent mixed with a faint metallic tang. You run your fingers over it. The surface is a landscape of precise, parallel stitching. Dozens of channels have been sewn into the fabric, and housed within each is a thin, rigid stay. You were told it would be steel, but you also see finer, more flexible-looking strips. Your mother had explained that the best corsets used a combination. The primary stays, the ones that did the real work of shaping, were indeed steel, but for areas that required a little more give, they used hollow bone. This is that strange, marine scent you noticed before. It wasn't burnet oils, but baleen the carrot and no US plates from the mouth of a baleen whale. A material that was both incredibly strong and surprisingly flexible. It could be shaped with steam to follow the exact curves of a woman's body. This hybrid construction was a mark of a quality corset. Then you look at the hardware. Down the very front is the busk. It's a pair of long, wide steel plates. One side has a series of metal loops, boar eyes, and the other has corresponding mushroom-shaped studs. This, you realize, is how you get an undoubted thing without having to completely unlace it every time. It looks like a piece of industrial machinery, a clever but intimidating closure system. You turn it over. The back is a dizzying lattice of crisscrossing laces, threaded through dozens of tiny, metal-rimmed eyelets. The laces themselves are not delicate ribbons, they are a single, incredibly long and strong cord, like a ship's rigging in miniature. This is the engine of the corset. This is where the power comes from. Let me assist you, Madame Dubois says, entering the room with the air of a surgeon about to begin an operation. You stand in your chemise. A thin cotton layer meant to go between your skin and the corset to absorb sweat and prevent chafing. This was a critical, if often overlooked, piece of the puzzle. A dirty corset was a health hazard, and cleaning one was a monumental task, so the chemise was the real workhorse of hygiene. Madame Dubois holds the corset up. It seems impossibly small. You hold your arms up, and she wraps it around you. The fabric is cold and stiff against your skin. She fastens the front busk first, working from the bottom up. Click, click, click. The metal studs snap into their eyes, and suddenly your torso is encased. It's not tight yet, just contained. Then, she moves to your back. She takes the two long ends of the lace and pulls. The effect is immediate and shocking. You gasp as the structure suddenly tightens around your midsection. It's not a gentle hug, it's a firm, unyielding compression. Your entire torso is being reshaped in real time. Breathe out, she instructs. You exhale, and on your breath, she gives another, stronger pull. The two sides of the corset at your back, which were several inches apart, are now drawing closer together. You feel a pressure you have never experienced before. It's not just on your waist, it's on your lower ribs, pushing them inward and upward. You instinctively try to take a deep belly breath, but you can't. Your diaphragm has hit a wall. We will not close it completely today, she says. Her voice calm and steady as she deftly knots the laces at your waist. This is your starting point. She turns you to face the mirror. The reflection is bizarre. It's you, but it's not you. Your waist has been visibly carved out, creating a curve that wasn't there 10 minutes ago. Your posture is perfect by default. Slouching is a physical impossibility. Your bust is pushed up and forward, creating a prominent, high shelf. You look taller, more slender, and profoundly uncomfortable. There's a debate among historians about the true average waist reduction, while tales of 16-inch waists were likely the exception. A reduction of 4 to 6 inches from one's natural waist measurement was common and considered quite fashionable. For you, the initial for introduction feels like a foot. Madame Dubois makes a few final adjustments, her expert fingers checking the tension. You will feel a heightened awareness of your body, she says. In what must be the understatement of the century, you will learn to move with it, not against it. She leaves you to get dressed. Pulling your dress on over this new foundation is a revelation. Suddenly, the cut of the fabric makes sense. The way the skirt is designed to flare from the waist, the way the bodice is meant to sit smoothly over the torso, it all clicks into place. The corset is the hidden architecture that gives the fashion its shape. Without it, the clothes are just limp fabric. With it, you are a walking sculpture. You step out of the fitting room, moving stiffly. Your mother looks you over, not at your face, but at your silhouette. She gives a single, satisfied nod. The job is done. You are now correctly packaged. Leaving the corset raised shop, you feel a strange mix of pride and panic. The carriage ride home is a completely new experience. You can't slouch back against the velvet seat. You are held perpetually upright, as if a governess has her hand permanently in the small of your back. Every jolt of the carriage doesn't ripple through your body, it travels up your new, rigid spine. You are acutely aware of the hollow bone and steel encasing you, a constant, firm pressure that reminds you with every passing second that your body is no longer entirely your own. This is the beginning of the seasoning process, or as it was sometimes called, breaking in the corset. Except, it feels less like you are breaking in the corset and more like the corset is breaking you in. Madame Dubois's words echo in your head to hours the first day. It sounds like such a short amount of time, but after only 30 minutes, you are already counting the seconds. The initial novelty of your new, fashionable shape is wearing off, replaced by a growing list of physical complaints. There's a dull ache beginning in your lower back, Your ribs feel compressed, and a persistent, low-grade shortness of breath is your new reality. You try to take a satisfying breath, but the corset stops you short. When you get home, you attempt to go about your afternoon as usual. You sit down in the parlor with a book. This simple act now requires a new technique. You can't just drop into a chair. You have to approach it, turn, and lower your entire torso as a single, solid unit, bending only at the hips and knees. It's like being a toy soldier. Once seated, you are perched on the edge of the chair, spine perfectly straight. Leaning back is out of the question. The back of the corset digs into you if you try. You realize with a sinking feeling that comfortable lounging is a thing of the past. The 2-hour mark finally arrives. With a sense of profound relief, you go to your room. Your maid, a young woman named Sarah who has been with your family for years, looks at you with a mixture of pity and professional duty. Unlacing you is a process. She works the long cord loose, and with each tug, you feel the pressure recede. When she finally pulls the laces wide enough for you to unhook the front busk, the sensation is extraordinary. It's a rush of freedom. You take a huge, deep breath, the first proper one in hours, and your lungs ache with the sudden expansion. Your skin is red and patterned with the lines of the corset seams on dilates. You feel a strange emptiness around your middle, a ghostly sensation of being unsupported. For a moment, you feel weak, as if your own muscles have forgotten how to hold you up. This dependency was one of the corset's most insidious effects. While it provided external support, it caused the wearer's own core and back muscles to atrophy over time. Women who had been corseted for years often felt physically weak and unable to maintain good posture without it. This led to the belief, a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, that the female body was inherently weak and required constant artificial support. The next day, as instructed, you are laced back in for 4 hours. The initial shock is less, but the prolonged discomfort is greater. The day after, 6, it's a grueling, incremental process. You are not just getting used to the feeling, your body is literally being rearranged. You're lower, or floating. Ribs are being gently but persistently pushed inward. Your internal organs are beginning a slow, reluctant migration. This process of seasoning wasn't just about softening the stiff coital fabric. It was about your flesh and bone yielding to the corset's relentless mold. Historians still debate the severity and universality of this organ rearrangement. Medical illustrations from the era show dramatic, almost grotesque displacement of the liver, stomach, and intestines. While these were often based on the most extreme cases of tight lacing, modern medical experts agree that long-term, moderate corseting would have inevitably caused some degree of internal compression and displacement, impacting digestion and circulation. During this week of seasoning, you discover a litany of small miseries, and each can develop deep under the corset, in a place you absolutely cannot reach, and it can drive you to the brink of madness. A sudden noise might make you jump, but your torso can't react quickly, leading to a strange, jarring sensation. You also learn about a curious, unmentioned phenomenon: the corset sounds. It creaks when you move. The steel busk and hollowbone stays rub against their channels, producing a faint, rhythmic creak sound. It's a subtle but constant companion, the soundtrack to your new life. This is one of those odd, intimate details lost to history, the personal soundscape of a corseted woman. By the end of the week, you can wear the corset for the entire day without feeling the acute panic of the first few hours. It has become a dull, constant presence, a fact of life. You are starting to accept the trade-off. In exchange for your freedom of movement, your ability to breathe deeply, and your general physical comfort, you have been given a shape, a perfect, socially acceptable, fashionable shape. Your mother is pleased. She says you are carrying yourself like a lady now. You walk into her room, and you can feel the approving glances of her friends. You have successfully been molded. The seasoning is over. This is not a temporary garment for special occasions. This is your life now. From the moment you get dressed in the morning until the moment you are unlaced for bed. Now that the initial, agonizing seasoning period is over, your life settles into a new, constricted rhythm. The corset is no longer a novelty, it's the first thing you put on after your chemise in the morning and the last thing you take off at night. Your day is now defined by its presence, and the most fundamental change, the one that underpins every other discomfort, is the way you breathe. You have, without even realizing it, mastered a new and entirely unnatural skill for thoracic breathing. Be sure, like any healthy human, you practice diaphragmatic breathing. You'd inhale. Your diaphragm would contract downwards, and your belly would expand, pulling air deep into the lower lobes of your lungs. It's efficient, calming, and delivers the maximum amount of oxygen. That is now physically impossible. The corset binds your waist and lower ribs so tightly that your diaphragm can't descend. Any attempt to belly breathe results in a useless push against an unyielding wall of steel and hollow bone. So your body adapts. It has to. You begin to breathe exclusively with the top portion of your lungs. You inhale, and only your upper chest and shoulders rise. It's a shallow, rapid way of breathing. You are sipping air, not drinking it in. At first, this left you feeling perpetually on the verge of being out of breath, walking up a flight of stairs. An act you once did without a thought now becomes a calculated effort. You have to pause halfway up, not because your leg muscles are tired, but because you can't get enough air in your lungs to power them. You find yourself taking 2 or 3 shallow breaths for every 1 deep breath you used to take. This shallow breathing had a cascade of effects. The reduced oxygen intake contributed to a general state of low-level fatigue. It also made you far more susceptible to fainting, a phenomenon so common it became a cliché of the Victorian era. A sudden shock, a crowded room, or a moment of emotional distress could be enough to tip you over the edge. Your brain, deprived of a quick, deep gulp of oxygen, would simply check out for a moment. This constant, low-grade hypoxia is what made smelling salts a staple in every lady's handbag. They weren't just for dramatic effect, they were a genuine first aid tool to jolt a person back to consciousness after a faint. You learn to manage your energy. You move more slowly, more deliberately. You avoid sudden exertion. Your world, in a way, shrinks to a pace that your constricted lungs can support. There's a curious side effect to this, a strange, unsung skill you develop. Because your breathing is so shallow, you become an expert at conserving it. You learn to speak in shorter sentences, to time your words to your exhalations. You become a master of the graceful, unhurried movement that was so prized in a lady. What looked like elegant composure from the outside was, in reality, a carefully managed energy crisis. The medical community of the time was beginning to catch on, while some doctors still promoted corsets for postural support. A growing number were writing articles and pamphlets about the dangers of constriction. They pointed to the way shallow breathing failed to properly ventilate the lungs, making women more susceptible to respiratory illnesses like pneumonia and tuberculosis. They argued that the body was a perfect machine that didn't need such artificial and damaging interference. Yet, these warnings were often dismissed as alarmist, fashion, and the social imperative behind it was a much more powerful force than a doctor's recommendation. There's an ongoing debate about the psychological impact of this breathing. Some historians and theorists suggest that this chronic shallow breathing could have contributed to the stereotype of the hysterical or anxious Victorian woman. The physical symptoms of anxiety, shortness of breath, a feeling of tightness in the chest, lightheadedness were, in fact, the daily physical reality for millions of corseted women. It raises a fascinating chicken and egg question: did the corsets create the vapors and the fainting spells? Or were they simply a reflection of a society that perceived women as inherently delicate and prone to such episodes? One afternoon, you are sitting in the garden, trying to read. A bee buzzes lazily past your ear. Without thinking, you flinch and let out a small gasp. The gasp is cut short, choked off by the corset. You feel a familiar, Dizzying wave wash over you as black spots dance in your vision. You grip the arm of the bench, close your eyes, and focus on taking those tiny, measured sips of air. 1, 2, 3. The world slowly swims back into focus. You didn't faint, not this time. You've learned to manage the ebb. Use it there, your book forgotten in your lap, just breathing, shallowly, carefully. You have mastered the art of breathing sideways, of breathing upwards, of breathing in every way except the one nature intended. It is your new normal. The quiet, breathless foundation of your life as a lady. With your breathing conquered or perhaps surrendered, you now face the daily logistical challenges of living in a cage. Simple, unconscious movements you've performed your whole life are now complex engineering problems that require planning and strategy. At the top of this list is the deceptively simple act of sitting down and standing up. As you discovered on your first day, you can no longer fall. Your torso, from your hips to your bust, is one solid, inflexible unit. To sit, you must approach a chair as if you are about to perform a choreographed dance move. You walk towards it, stop, and execute a neat, precise turn. Then, keeping your back rammed straight, you hinge at your hips and bend your knees, lowering yourself with slow, controlled grace. There is no relaxing into the seat. No satisfying sigh as you sink into the cushions. You perch. Your back remains straight, unsupported by the chair back, which you can reach without an uncomfortable backward tilt. You learn to sit for hours this way during social calls, church services, and long dinners, maintaining a look of serene composure while your back muscles, the ones not being supported by the corset, scream in protest. Standing up is the reverse of this careful ballet. You place your hands on your knees or the arms of the chair for leverage, push upwards with your legs, and rise as a single, cohesive block. Any attempt to bend at the waist to gain momentum is futile and will only result in the steel stays digging painfully into you. This enforced grace is what gave Victorian women their famously elegant, gliding posture. It wasn't an affectation, it was a physical necessity dictated by their underwear. Then there is the challenge of bending over. Say you drop your handkerchief or a book. In your previous life, you would have bent at the waist, picked it up, and straightened up in a single, fluid motion. Now, that is impossible. To retrieve the dropped object, you have a few options, none of them ideal. The first is the lady's lunge. You place one foot forward, one foot back, and sink into a deep, graceful lunge, keeping your torso perfectly vertical as you descend. It's elegant, but slow and requires a good deal of leg strength. The second option is the debutante squat, a deep PLI, again keeping your back arrow straight. This is the preferred method for retrieving something directly at your feet. For a young woman like you, these moves are manageable, if awkward. For an older woman, or one less physically fit, a dropped object might as well be on the moon. It would simply stay there until a gentleman or a servant could be called upon to retrieve it. This physical limitation reinforced the idea of female helplessness, a manufactured dependency. But the real Everest of daily movement is putting on your own shoes and stockings. This is a task that becomes nearly impossible to perform alone. It requires a degree of spinal flexion that you simply no longer possess. Each morning, you have to sit on the edge of your bed or a chair while your maid, Sarah, kneels before you. She rolls your silk stockings up your legs and then helps you into your button-up boots, using a long-handled button hook to fasten the dozen or so tiny buttons. It's an intimate, slightly infantilizing ritual. You are completely dependent on another person for this basic act of dressing. This is a small, daily humiliation that is simply accepted as part of the routine. The history of the button hook is, in fact, intricately tied to the history of restrictive clothing. It was a necessary tool when fingers could no longer reach their intended target. Historians have noted how these physical limitations shaped not just a woman's day, but the very design of her environment. Furniture was often higher off the ground to reduce the distance one had to lower oneself. Tongs and other long-handled implements became more common for reaching things. The entire world was subtly adapted to accommodate the fact that half of its upper-class population was effectively wearing a full torso splint. There is a question that scholars are still exploring: to what extent did this restricted movement impact a woman's cognitive and emotional world when your physical sphere of influence is so dramatically curtailed? When you can't easily retrieve a dropped book or explore a garden path without careful planning? Does your intellectual curiosity also become, in some way, more constrained? Did the corset, by forcing a woman to constantly focus on the mechanics of her own body, prevent her from fully engaging with the world around her? It's a speculative but compelling idea. One afternoon, you are arranging flowers in the drawing room. A single, perfect rosebud falls from the vase and rolls under a low side table. Your first instinct is to duck down and get it. You begin the motion, and the corset stops you dead. The top edge pushes uncomfortably into the base of your bust. The bottom edge digs into your hips. You are trapped. You try the lunge, but the table is too low. You try the squat, but you can't reach far enough under it. The rosebud sits there, just inches from your grasp, but it might as well be miles away. You stare at it for a long moment, a wave of pure, unadulterated frustration washing over you. You are a prisoner in your own clothes. Finally, with a sigh of defeat, you straighten up, walk to the doorway, and ring the small silver bell for a maid. As you wait, you catch a reflection in a mirror. You look poised, elegant, and perfectly composed, a true lady. The corset's tyranny extends beyond your bones and muscles, reaching deep into your digestive system. This is a lesson you learn not from a doctor's pamphlet, but from bitter, uncomfortable experience. The first time you attend a formal dinner party while fully corseted is a revelation in misery. You sit at the long, polished mahogany table, candlelight glittering on silver and crystal. The air is filled with conversation and the scent of roasted meat. Course after course arrives, a parade of soups, fish, poultry, and elaborate desserts. In your pre-corset life, this would have been a delight. Now, it's an ordeal. With your first few bites of soup, you notice it. A feeling of fullness. Far too soon. Your stomach, which is being firmly compressed by the lower half of your corset, simply has no room to expand as it normally would. It's being squeezed from the outside. Its capacity drastically reduced. You watch as the men around you eat with gusto. Socially acceptable act of relief you would never be afforded. You, on the other hand, have to engage in a delicate and secret calculus with every spoonful. You take a small piece of the roasted chicken. You chew it slowly, thoroughly, because you've learned that poorly chewed food will sit like a stone in your constricted gut. After a few bites, the feeling of pressure intensifies. It's not the pleasant fullness of a satisfying meal, it's a hard, uncomfortable pressure pushing upwards. If you eat too much, too quickly, you will suffer the consequences: indigestion, heartburn, and a deeply unbecoming need to belch, which you must suppress at all cost. You feel your stomach complaining, a silent, gurgling protest from deep within your fashionable prison. You quickly learn the art of performance eating. You move the food around your plate, take tiny, bird-like bites, and spend more time lifting your wine glass to your lips than your fork. You become adept at hiding your lack of consumption behind lively conversation and graceful gestures. It's a sad, secret art shared by all the women in the room. You glance across the table and see your aunt dab her lips with her napkin, her plate still looking largely untouched despite the fact that 3 courses have already been served. There's a silent, shared understanding in her eyes. This forced portion control had a significant impact on women's nutrition. While they were presented with lavish meals, their actual caloric intake was often surprisingly low. This, combined with the low-grade hypoxia from shallow breathing, contributed to the stereotype of the pale, delicate, ethereal Victorian lady. They weren't ethereal, they were oft unchronically undernourished and underoxygenated. One of the more peculiar and less discussed aspects of this is the teaspoon-sized appetite phenomenon. Some diet manuals of the era actually praised the corset for its ability to curb the appetite, framing this biological limitation as a sign of feminine intness and self-control. It was a masterful piece of propaganda, turning a harmful side effect into a desirable trait. The long-term effects of this constant gastric compression were, as you might imagine, not good. Doctors of the period noted a prevalence of digestive ailments among women, from chronic constipation as the intestines struggled to perform their duties in a cramped space to more serious issues like hiatal hernias, where the stomach is pushed up through the diaphragm. Of course, at the dinner table, these concerns are far from your mind. Your only goal is to survive the meal without fainting or embarrassing yourself. There is an ongoing academic discussion about the link between corseting, diet, and the rise of eating disorders like anorexia nervosa, which was first medically identified in the late 19th century. While it's impossible to draw a direct causal line, some scholars argue that the corset created a physical and psychological environment that was conducive to disordered eating. It forcibly restricted intake, placed an intense focus on the size of the body, specifically the waist, and medicalized the appetite, framing a lack of it as a virtue. It's a complex and sensitive topic, but the corset's role as a potential accomplice is hard to ignore. By the time the dessert trolley arrives, laden with trifles, jellies, and cakes, the very thought of another bite is nauseating. The pressure in your abdomen is intense. You feel a bit lightheaded, and the conversation around you seems to be coming from a great distance. You politely decline dessert, earning a small, approving smile from your mother. You have successfully navigated the culinary minefield. You have displayed the proper, ladylike lack of appetite. Later that night, as your maid unlaces you, the relief is immense. But, as you lie in bed, you feel a hunger pang. A deep, unsatisfied craving for the food you couldn't eat. It's a lonely, frustrating feeling. You are starving in a land of plenty, all for the sake of a line, a curve, a silhouette. It's a warm afternoon, and the drawing room is stuffy. The windows are open, but not a breath of air stirs the heavy velvet curtains. You are paying a social call with your mother, one of a seemingly endless series of visits that make up the fabric of your days. You are sitting on a small, unforgiving sofa, making polite conversation with a woman whose name you've already forgotten. The room is crowded. The combined body heat of 20 people and the scent of wilting flowers and perfume are making the air thick and hard to breathe. You've been feeling off all day. Your lunch, as small as it was, sits uncomfortably in your compressed stomach. Your corset feels tighter than usual, a band of steel and bone that is slowly ratcheting up the pressure. Your shallow breaths are getting shallower. The edges of your vision begin to prickle and darken, a warning sign you've come to know all too well. The drone of conversation fades into a meaningless hum. The pattern on the wallpaper seems to swim before your eyes. You try to focus, to take a slightly deeper breath, but it's no use. The world tilts, dissolves into a grey fog, and then goes black. You don't fall to the floor with a dramatic thud. That rarely happens. Instead, your body, held rigid by the corset, simply slumps sideways onto the sofa cushions. You are vaguely aware of a flurry of motion around you, with hushed, concerned voices, of someone fanning your face. Then, the sharp, pungent scent of ammonia hits your nostrils, a chemical blast that shocks your system back into operation. Your eyes flutter open. You are looking up at the concerned faces of your mother and the hostess. You have fainted. This is the moment you truly understand the purpose of a piece of furniture. You had previously ignored the fainting couch. It's right there, in the corner of the room. It's not quite a sofa, not quite a bed. It's a long, upholstered chaise with a raised end for the headend. Crucially, no back along its length. It exists for this exact purpose, to provide a convenient, elegant place for a lady to recover from a swoon without causing a major disruption. To gentlemen help you to your feet and guide you to the fainting couch. You are laid down upon it, your head propped up, your feet slightly elevated. the design suddenly makes perfect sense. A woman in a corset couldn't be laid flat on her back on the floor, she wouldn't be able to breathe. The fainting couch kept her torso at a slight angle, relieving some of the pressure on her lungs and heart. The phenomenon of the Victorian swoon is often romanticized or mocked, seen as a theatrical display of feminine frailty. But as you lie there, feeling the blood slowly return to your head, you understand it was a genuine physiological event. It was the logical outcome of a body under siege, lungs that couldn't draw a full breath, a stomach that couldn't properly digest food, and a circulatory system struggling to pump blood from a constricted core to the brain. Fainting wasn't an affectation, it was a biological failsafe. What's truly fascinating, and a topic of some historical debate, is the social acceptance of the swoon. Did women faint so often because their corsets made them physically prone to it, or did they feel a social pressure to faint? As it was seen as a sign of delicacy and refined sensibilities, the truth is likely a complex interplay of both. The physical reality of the corset created the predisposition, and the social environment normalized and even romanticized the outcome. A woman who never fainted might be seen as suspiciously robust, perhaps even coarse. A well-timed swoon could be a powerful, if passive, tool, a way to exit an uncomfortable conversation, gain attention, or demonstrate one's exquisite sensitivity. There's also a quirky, lesser-known accessory that went hand-in-hand with fainting culture: the vinaigrette. This was a small, ornate container, often worn on a chain, with a perforated lid. Inside was a tiny sponge soaked not in smelling salts, but in aromatic vinegar, blended with scents like lavender or rosemary. It was a more ladylike and portable alternative to a bulky bottle of ammonia. A woman feeling faint could discreetly lift her vinaigrette to her nose for a restorative sniff. It was a piece of personal medical equipment disguised as jewelry. As you lie on the fainting couch, the room comes back into focus. The hostess is patting your hand, assuring you it's quite all right. Your mother is looking at you with an expression that is one part concern and two parts exasperation. You have become, for a few moments, the center of attention, but not in a way you ever wanted. You feel weak, embarrassed, and profoundly angry at the garment that is still holding you captive. This experience solidifies a grim reality: your body is no longer a reliable partner. It is a temperamental machine, prone to sudden shutdowns, and you are merely its warden. From now on, you will enter every crowded room, every social gathering, with a new layer of anxiety, always wondering if this will be the time you once again lose control. The fainting couch in the corner is no longer just a piece of furniture, it's a constant, silent reminder of your own fragility. As you navigate this new, corseted world, you begin to understand that the garment is more than just a piece of underwear. It is a communication device. The tightness of your laces, the rigidity of your posture, sends a constant, silent message to everyone around you. You are, quite literally, wearing your social standing and your moral character on your sleeve, or rather, around your waist. The prevailing ideology, drilled into you by your mother, by etiquette manuals, by the very air you breathe, is that a tightly laced corset is a sign of a disciplined, respectable, and virtuous woman. A loose woman, in the parlance of the day, was not just a moral judgment, it was often a literal, physical description. A woman who did not tightly control her waist was seen as someone who likely did not control her appetites, her emotions, or her morals. The corset was a physical manifestation of self-restraint. Its discomfort was framed as a worthy sacrifice, a daily act of discipline that proved you were a good girl. You see this code played out everywhere. At church, you notice the impeccable, unyielding postures of the most respected women in the congregation. Their torsos are long, their waists tiny beneath their Sunday best. They are living statues of piety and propriety. Conversely, you hear the hushed, scandalized whispers about a young widow who has returned to society after her mourning period. Had you seen her? One woman murmurs to another behind her fan. Her corsets are practically undone. It's no wonder, with the way she carries on. The accusation is clear: her slack laces are an advertisement for her slack morals. This connection between tight lacing and virtue was so ingrained that it created a strange sort of peer pressure. Young women were encouraged to cinch each other tighter, to compete for the distinction of having the most fashionably small waist. It became a point of pride. A girl who complained about the discomfort or who secretly loosened her laces was seen as weak-willed, lacking the fortitude required of a proper lady. But then, you start to notice the exceptions, the subtle deviations from the rule. You learn that the language of the corset is more complex than you first thought. It's not just a simple binary of tight equals good and loose equals bad. There were certain women who were, by virtue of their profession, expected to be loosely laced. Actresses, for instance, on stage. They needed a greater freedom of movement and non-capacity to project their voices. Their less restrictive corsets were seen as unnecessary to love their trade, but it also subtly contributed to the perception of actresses as being morally suspect, existing in a world outside the bounds of polite society. This is where you encounter a fascinating and somewhat scandalous piece of hidden history: the bad girl corset. While polite society associated tight lacing with virtue, another parallel world existed where the corset was used for entirely different purposes. In the demi-monde of courtesans and prostitutes, the corset was not a symbol of restraint, but a tool of seduction and exaggeration. These women often practiced the most extreme forms of tight lacing, not to signal piety, but to create a hyperfeminine, almost cartoonish silhouette, a massive bust and hips bursting from an impossibly tiny waist. Their corsets were often made of brightly colored satin, scarlet red, deep purple, not colors that a respectable lady would never wear for her underpinnings. They were adorned with frivolous lace, ribbons, and embroidery. The corset, in their hands, was transformed from a symbol of repression into an instrument of overt, commercialized sexuality. There's a persistent, though lightly hypocritical, bit of folklore from the era: the idea that you could tell a woman's profession by the color of her corset. This is almost certainly an oversimplification, but the core idea holds some truth. The materials, colors, and decorations of a corset, if it were ever glimpsed, could send powerful signals about the wearer's class and moral standing. It's a detail that adds a layer of complexity to the garment's story. Historians are still untangling the web of these conflicting messages. Was the corset primarily a tool for enforcing chastity and modesty in good women, or was its main purpose to create an erotically charged silhouette? Regardless of the wearer's intent, the answer is that it was, paradoxically, both. It operated as a powerful symbol into completely opposite moral universes simultaneously. For a respectable woman like you, it was a suit of armor that protected your reputation. For a solid woman, it was a costume that advertised her availability. The same object, serving radically different, and mutually exclusive, social functions. You find yourself becoming a student of this silent language. You can now tell, with a reasonable degree of accuracy, the social standing of a woman from across a room, simply by the way she holds herself, by the unyielding line of her torso beneath her dress. You adjust your own posture, ensuring your message is clear: you are a lady. You are disciplined. You are respectable. You pull your shoulders back and endure the pinch, because you know that in this world, your survival depends on it. The corset is your cage, but it is also your shield. The act of putting on your corset is not a solitary one. It is a daily ritual of intimacy and dependency. A small-to-person play that unfolds in the privacy of your bedroom. Your partner in this ritual is your lady's maid, Sarah. Her role in your life has shifted. She is no longer just the person who helps you dress and does your hair. She is the engineer of your silhouette. She holds the power to make your day bearable or tortuous. The morning begins with you standing in your thin chemise, your back to her. She wraps the corset around you and fastens the front bust. Then comes the critical part. She takes the long, strong laces in her hands. This is where the unspoken negotiation begins. The lacing process itself was a surprisingly complex skill. A good maid didn't just pull the laces tight from top to bottom. She knew how to manipulate the excess of the laces to distribute the pressure, often pulling tightest at the true waist and leaving a little more room for the ribs and hips. "Ready?" Mishi asks, her voice neutral. You nod, bracing yourself. She plants a foot on the small of your back for leverage. A comment is startling. Technique and pulls. The corset cinches you shut, and you let out the breath you were holding. This is the moment of truth. Is it too tight? Is there a state digging into you? Is the pressure evenly distributed? You have to communicate these things to her in a subtle code. A little easier at the top today, Sarah, you might say, and she will know to slightly loosen the laces around your ribcage. Or if you have a particularly important event to attend and need to look your absolute best, you might say, a bit firmer at the waist. I think this daily interaction is a strange form of intimacy. Sarah knows the landscape of your body better than anyone. She knows about the mole on your back, the way your left side can tolerate more pressure than your right. She is the keeper of your physical secrets. Her mood, her attentiveness, her skill directly translate into your physical comfort for the next 12 hours. A maid who was angry with her mistress could, with a few sharp, vindictive tugs of the lace, inflict a day of misery. A single, carelessly tied knot could be impossible to undo by yourself, leaving you trapped. This gave maids a subtle, yet undeniable, form of power in a household where they otherwise had very little. The language of lacing wasn't just about comfort, it was also about health and status. A skilled maid would know not to lace her mistress too tightly if she was feeling unwell. She would know to use a different lacing pattern for a dancing corset which needed more flexibility versus a formal reception corset which prioritized a rigid line. This esoteric knowledge was passed down from senior maids to junior ones, a kind of oral tradition of the servant class. Some maids even became minor celebrities within their social circles for their lacing skills, their services highly sought after by discerning ladies. This is a fascinating, below-stairs aspect of corset history that is often uncompletely overlooked in favor of focusing on the women who wore them. Then there is the secret language of the laces themselves. You've learned about the fan lacing system on some corsets, a complex arrangement of straps and buckles that allowed a woman to make minor adjustments to her own tightness throughout the day, a small but precious bit of autonomy. You've also heard whispers of a far more scandalous code. It's said that in some circles, the way the final knot was tied, a simple bow versus a double knot, for instance, could be a secret signal from a married woman to a potential lover, indicating whether her husband was home or away, and whether she might be available for a private conversation later. Historians are deeply divided on the truth of this secret language of laces. There is very little concrete written evidence to support it, and it may be nothing more than a romantic, titillating myth that grew up around the mystique of Victorian underpinnings. But whether it's true or not, the very existence of the rumor speaks to the immense social and symbolic weight that was placed on this single garment and the rituals surrounding it. The idea that a simple knot could hold the key to a woman's secrets was a powerful one. Your relationship with Sarah is a delicate balance of authority and dependence. You are her employer, but she holds the strings. You rely on her for your comfort, your appearance, and your ability to function in society. She relies on you for her livelihood. It's a symbiotic relationship, played out every morning and every evening. Tonight, as she unlaces you, you feel the familiar, overwhelming sense of relief as the pressure recedes. Thank you, Sarah, you say, and the words are filled with genuine gratitude. She has released you from your cage for another night. She nods, her expression unreadable, as she carefully coils the long lace, ready for the ritual to begin all over again in the morning. You have grown accustomed to the external sensations of the corset, the pressure, the stiffness, the shallow breathing, but what you can't see, and what you try very hard not to think about, is the silent, dramatic rearrangement happening inside you. Your body is not a solid block of clay to be molded, it's a complex system of soft, pliable organs, and they are now involved in a desperate, long-term game of musical chairs. The primary force of the corset is directed at your waist, but its effects radiate both up and down. Let's start with your ribs. The upper ribs are relatively fixed to your sternum, but the lower ones, the floating ribs, are much more malleable. Day after day, the relentless pressure of the steel and hollow bone stays is pushing them inward and upward. Over years, this can permanently alter the shape of a woman's ribcage, creating a higher, more conical torso. This isn't speculation. Skeletal remains of long-term corset wearers from this period clearly show this deformation. The ribs are narrowed, sometimes overlapping, a perm intricate of fashions demands etched in bone. As the ribcage is compressed, the lungs within it are also squeezed. You already know the effect this has on your breathing, but it also means the lower lobes of your lungs are perpetually underinflated, which can make them more susceptible to infection. But the real drama is happening below your diaphragm. Imagine your abdominal cavity as a crowded apartment building with a fixed number of rooms. Now, imagine a hydraulic press is slowly squeezing the middle floors. The residents would have to go somewhere. Your liver, the largest internal organ, is usually nestled comfortably on the right side, under your diaphragm. The corset shoves it upwards, sometimes compressing it against the diaphragm so forcefully that it can leave deep grooves in the organ's surface. This was a common finding in autopsies of tightly laced women of the era. The stomach is also pushed upward and flattened, which helps explain the constant feeling of indigestion and the inability to eat a full meal. It's normal churning. Digestive motions are hampered. The organs below the waistline don't escape. Either they are pushed downwards. Your intestines, alone, coiled up responsible for absorbing nutrients, are crammed into a smaller and smaller space. This can lead to chronic constipation and other digestive woes, a common and unglamorous complaint of the Victorian lady. The most severe and frightening potential consequence of this downward pressure was uterine prolapse, a condition where the uterus descends from its normal position. This was a devastating and often life-altering complication. And while it's impossible to know the exact prevalence, 19th century medical journals are filled with discussions of female complaints that are consistent with this diagnosis. One of the most bizarre and little-known theories from the period was the idea of the wandering womb. Some pre-modern medical theories held that the uterus was not a fixed organ and could move around the body, causing all sorts of ailments, most notably hysteria. While this theory was largely discredited by the Victorian era, the very real physical displacement of organs caused by corseting created a new, mechanical version of this old myth. The organs were, in fact, wandering, not of their own accord, but under the duress of fashion. There is, as always, a historical debate surrounding the severity of all this. The most dramatic medical illustrations, showing livers folded in half and intestines crammed into the pelvis, were likely based on the most extreme cases, the tight lacers who pursued a 16-inch waist with single-minded obsession. For the average woman wearing a moderately laced corset, the displacement would have been less severe but still significant. The core issue, which modern doctors would confirm, is that your organs are not designed to be mobile. They are meant to stay in their designated spots, and forcing them to relocate, even slightly, puts a strain on the entire system. You try not to think about it. You try to ignore the gurgles and pangs that are not from hunger but from your body's internal protest. But sometimes, late at night, as you lie in bed, you can almost feel the strange, unsettling emptiness in your middle. The ghostly pressure where your organs have been shifted. You place a hand on your abdomen, where it is now soft and planed without the corset, and you wonder what the landscape inside you really looks like. It is a secret your body keeps, a hidden topography of displacement. You are a living testament to the fact that you can reshape a human being from the outside, but you cannot escape the internal consequences. The elegant, swan-like creature you present to the world is built on a foundation of silent, anatomical chaos. After several months of daily wear, you begin to notice a new and insidious side effect of your corset. It happens in the evening, after Sarah has unlaced you and you are free for the night. You feel a profound sense of weakness in your torso. When you sit up in bed to read, you find yourself slouching almost immediately, your back aching with a dull, unfamiliar fatigue. It feels as if your own muscles have forgotten how to do their job. And in a way, they have. Your corset has become your exoskeleton. The rigid steel and hollow bone stays have taken over the primary function of your own musculature. Your rectus spina eye muscles, which run along your spine and are responsible for holding you upright, no longer have to work. Your deep core muscles, the transverse abdominis, the obliques, which act as a natural, internal girdle, have been permanently switched off. The corset does all the work for them, day in and day out. These muscles are held in a passive, supported state, and like any muscle that isn't used, they have begun to weaken and atrophy. This creates a vicious cycle of dependency. The longer you wear the corset, the weaker your own muscles become. The weaker your muscles become, the more you feel you need the corset to support you. You begin to feel naked, vulnerable, and strangely floppy without it. The good posture it forces upon you during the day is completely lost the moment you take it off. You are training your body to be reliant on an external device for its own structural integrity. This muscular atrophy was one of the central arguments used by early critics of corsetry. They argued that far from improving posture, corsets destroyed it in the long run. They pointed out that women in cultures where restrictive garments were not worn often had far superior posture and less back pain. A popular, though perhaps apocryphal, anecdote from the period tells of society ladies visiting Turkish baths and being shocked by the effortless, upright posture of the local women, whose strong core muscles had never been undermined by a corset. You experience this dependency in small, frustrating ways, reaching for a book on a high shelf. An act that requires core stability now makes your back winch. Sitting at your writing desk for an hour without the corset support becomes an exercise in endurance. You find yourself propping your chin on your hand, slumping over the page, feeling a complete lack of a central pillar. The corset, which you once hated as a cage, has now become a necessary crutch. The idea of going without it for a full day seems daunting, not because of social pressure, but because of the anticipated physical discomfort and weakness. This leads to a strange and little discussed phenomenon: corset training in reverse. Some women who decided to give up their corsets had to go through a period of physical rehabilitation. They had to consciously work to re-engage their core muscles, performing gentle exercises to slowly rebuild the strength that had been lost over years of artificial support. It was a process of reclaiming their own bodies, of teaching their spine to be a spine once more. The debate among historians is not about whether this atrophy occurred. The basic principles of physiology confirm that it did, but about the social and psychological implications. Did this physical dependency contribute to the perception of women as the weaker sex that created a self-fulfilling prophecy? A lifetime of corseting produced a woman who was, in fact, physically weaker in her torso and more prone to back ailments, thus proving the initial assumption that she needed the support in the first place. It was a perfect, closed loop of logic. One evening, you are getting ready for bed, standing in front of your mirror in your chemise. You try to stand up straight, to replicate the posture you have all day. You pull your shoulders back and lift your chest. You can hold it for a few seconds, but the effort is immense. As soon as you relax, your shoulders slump forward, and a dull ache spreads across your lower back. You are like a puppet whose strings have been cut. You look at your reflection, at the soft, unsupported line of your torso, and you feel a sense of alienation from your own body. It's no longer the strong, capable vessel of your childhood. It is something that needs to be assembled each morning, propped up and arranged for public viewing. The corset has not just changed your shape, it has changed your fundamental relationship with your own strength. It has taught you, on a deep, muscular level, that you cannot stand on your own. Life, as it goes, moves on. You marry a respectable man, and soon you find yourself in a delicate and paradoxical situation. You are pregnant, in an era where pregnancy was a state of confinement, something to be discreetly hidden for as long as possible. Your changing body presents a new set of sartorial challenges. Your waist, the very center of your identity as a lady, is beginning to thicken and expand. The standard corset, your constant companion, is becoming an instrument of torture. You might think that pregnancy would offer a 9-month reprieve from the tyranny of the corset, a blessed escape. You would be wrong. The social and aesthetic pressure for a defined waist did not simply vanish with a positive pregnancy test. For the first few months, many women simply loosened the laces of their existing corset or switched to an older, more stretched out one. The goal was to maintain the illusion of a fashionable figure for as long as humanly possible, hiding the indiscreet evidence of their condition from the public eye. But as your pregnancy progresses, this becomes untenable. This is where you encounter one of the most baffling uncontradictory garments ever conceived, the maternity corset. You visit your trusted corsetier, Madame Dubois, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and trepidation. She, however, is untrappable. This is a standard part of her business. She presents you with a range of maternity or gestational models. At first glance, they look remarkably like regular corsets, with the same rigid bust, steel stays, and complex lacing. But upon closer inspection, you see the clever and slightly horrifying modifications. These corsets featured expandable panels, often with inserts of elastic, a relatively new and expensive material, or adjustable laced openings on the sides and front. This allowed the corset to grow with the wearer's abdomen. The lacing at the back was often more complex, allowing for precise adjustments to accommodate the changing shape. The primary purpose of this garment was twofold. First, it continued to provide support to the back, which was under increasing strain. Second, and perhaps more importantly, it was designed to shape and contain the growing bump, smoothing it out under the clothes to make it less conspicuous. It was a corset designed to create the most streamlined, least pregnant-looking pregnant silhouette possible. You are fitted for one. It feels profoundly strange. It's still restrictive, still holds your spine rigid, but it has a strange, engineered space at the front. It's a cage with an expandable front porch. Wearing it is a constant negotiation. Too loose, and it offers no support. Too tight, and the pressure on your abdomen is unbearable, and you instinctively feel unsafe. The medical opinion on these garments was, predictably, divided. Some doctors promoted them, arguing that they provided necessary back support and prevented the abdominal muscles from overstretching. They prescribed them as a piece of medical equipment. Other, more progressive physicians were horrified. They argued that constricting the abdomen during pregnancy could restrict fetal growth, interfere with the baby's positioning, and cause harm to both mother and child. This debate among historians is still active, where maternity caused a tool of social oppression, forcing pregnant women into a harmful and restrictive mold, or were they genuinely perceived as a helpful, supportive garment by the women who wore them? The answer, as is often the case, is likely both. For some women, the familiar feeling of support around their aching backs may have been welcome. For all, the ability to maintain a somewhat normal appearance and avoid the social stigma of a visible pregnancy was a powerful motivator. There's a strange, little-known detail about these corsets. Some of them came with special, detachable nursing stays or panels that could be unlaced or unhooped at the bust after the baby was born. This allowed a woman to breastfeed without having to remove the entire corset. A grimly practical innovation that demonstrates just how central the corset was to a woman's life, from maidenhood through motherhood. You wear your maternity corset through the middle months of your pregnancy. It allows you to continue attending social functions without your condition being overtly obvious, but the discomfort is immense. It feels like a lie you are wearing. You are constantly aware of the life growing inside you, a life that is pushing against the boundaries you are imposing upon it. You feel a new kind of frustration, not just for yourself, but for your unborn child. The garment is no longer just about your own comfort or appearance, it's about the space you are allowing for another being. One evening, in your 6th month, you simply cannot bear it any longer. The pressure, the confinement, the sheer absurdity of it all becomes too much. In a quiet act of rebellion, you unlace it and throw it on a chair. You put on a loose wrapper and feel an incredible, liberating sense of freedom. You can feel your baby move without a wall of hollow bone in the way. In that moment, the social pressure to look a certain way is finally, mercifully, outweighed by the biological imperative to simply be. Even as you navigate your own complex relationship with corsetry, you are aware that you are a moderate participant in this world. The society pages and ladies' magazines you read are filled with whispers and tantalizing, often scandalous, stories of the women who take this practice to its absolute extreme. These are the tight lacers. The women who are not content with a fashionable 4 or 6 introduction, but who are engaged in a lifelong, obsessive quest for the smallest waist humanly possible. They are the Olympians of corsetry. Their stories are passed around in hushed, disapproving, yet fascinated tones. You hear of aristocrats and actresses who allegedly cinched their waists down to 16, 15 or even a mythical 14 inches. These numbers seem impossible, the circumference of a candlestick, not a human torso. These women are both celebrities and cautionary tales. Their silhouettes, when glimpsed in public, are shockingly tiny, doll-like waists from which the bust and hips seem to explode in exaggerated, unnatural proportion. They are living caricatures of the female form. The process they undertake is known as waist training, a term that has seen a modern resurgence but had its roots in this extreme Victorian practice. It is a far more aggressive version of the seasoning you endured. These women would often sleep in their corsets, starting with a loosely laced night corset and gradually moving to tighter and more restrictive models. They would have corsets for every occasion, each one designed to maintain the maximum possible constriction. Their maids would be highly specialized, experts in achieving the tightest possible lace without, hopefully, causing their mistress to pass out entirely. The physical cost of this extremity is immense. You thought your displaced organs were a concern for these women. The internal rearrangement is radical. Their rickages are permanently deformed into an extreme hourglass shape. Their health is often fragile. They suffer from chronic digestive issues, shortness of breath, and a host of other ailments. Yet, for them, the aesthetic reward is worth the price. The tiny waist becomes their defining feature, their claim to fame. It sets them apart, making them objects of ardent envy. One of the strangest and most debated aspects of this subculture is the question of motivation. Why would anyone do this to themselves? The easy answer is vanity. But it's more complex than that. For some, it may have been a form of body modification, not unlike modern tattooing or piercing, a way to exert ultimate control over their flesh and sculpt it into a unique work of art. For others, it was a competitive sport. They would exchange letters, comparing measurements on techniques, striving to outdo one another in a bizarre and painful contest. There's a niche area of historical research dedicated to these corset correspondence columns that appeared in some fringe publications, where enthusiasts would share their progress and tips. A particularly curious debate among historians revolves around the role of men in this extreme practice. Was this all done to attract men? The answer is surprisingly ambiguous. While some men were undoubtedly captivated by this extreme silhouette, many period accounts, both medical and satirical, portray men as being repulsed or frightened by it. They describe the wasp waist as unnatural, grotesque, and unhealthy. Cartoons from magazines like Punch frequently lampooned the tight lacer, showing her as a vain, foolish creature, barely able to function. This has led some historians to argue that extreme tight lacing was not a practice performed for men at all, but was part of an intensely female-centric world of competition and aesthetic obsession. It was about impressing other women, about achieving a status within their own subculture that was largely invisible or incomprehensible to the male gaze. You see a woman reputed to be one of these devotees at the opera one evening. You can't help but stare. She moves with a slow, rigid grace that makes your own corseted movements look positively athletic. Her torso is so long and narrow it seems to defy the laws of anatomy. Often moves in short, fluttery bursts, a constant effort to keep her moving towards her face. She is both magnificent and terrifying. The men around her look on with a mixture of admiration and alarm. The women, however, watch her with a different kind of intensity. You say judgment, yes, but you also see a flicker of something else in their eyes as never of all, a hint of envy for her sheer, painful dedication to the ideal. You look down at your own figure, your respectable, moderately corseted waist. For the first time, it feels comfortable, spacious, almost loose in comparison. The existence of these extremists serves a strange social function. It recalibrates the definition of normal. Their shocking figures make your own daily discomfort seem minor, your own sacrifice reasonable. They are the vanguard, pushing the boundaries so that everyone else can occupy a slightly less painful middle ground. They are a living, breathing, barely breathing testament to how far the quest for the perfect hourglass figure can go. You sit in your parlor, stitching a piece of embroidery, the repetitive motion of familiar, coming rhythm. The corset holds you in your usual upright, ladylike posture. It's been years now. The cage is so familiar, it almost feels like a part of your own body. During these quiet moments, you find yourself pondering a fundamental question. The great, unresolved mystery at the heart of your daily discomfort. Who is this for why? Really, are you doing this? The most common and simplest answer is that you are doing it for men. This is the argument you hear most often, both in praise and in condemnation of the corset. The theory goes that the hourglass figure, the high, prominent bust, the tiny waist, the blooming hips, is the ultimate expression of feminine desirability. It exaggerates the secondary sexual characteristics of the female form, creating a potent, visual signal of fertility and womanhood that is designed to attract a mate. Your mother's lessons, the novels you read, the entire structure of society is built around the idea of securing a suitable husband. Therefore, the corset is a tool, a piece of essential equipment in the marriage market. You are sculpting yourself into the ideal shape that a man is supposed to desire. You think about your own husband. Does he truly prefer you this way? He has never said so directly. He compliments your appearance, of course, but his compliments are usually about a specific dress or the way you've done your hair. He has never once commented on the size of your waist. In the privacy of your own rooms, when you are unlaced and your body is soft and natural, he seems no less affectionate. Perhaps more so. You begin to wonder if this entire artifice is based on a collective, unexamined assumption about what men want. This leads you to the second major theory, one that feels, in many ways, more true to your own experience. Perhaps this isn't about men at all. Perhaps it's for the other women. You think back to every social gathering you've ever attended. The quickest, most penetrating, most judgmental glances always come from other women. It is they who assess your silhouette in a single, sweeping gaze. It is they who notice the slightest change in the line of your dress, who would be the first to whisper if your waistline seemed to be expanding. Society is a battlefield, and the currency of power is reputation and status. Your corset is your uniform. It signals that you belong to the right class, that you understand the rules, that you are a disciplined and worthy participant in the game. To appear without it, or to wear it loosely, would be to forfeit. It would be a surrender, an admission that you cannot or will not keep up. In this light, the corset becomes a tool of female-to-female competition. It's a silent, relentless arms race of self-denial. The woman who can endure the most discomfort, who can achieve the most fashionable figure, gains a higher standing in the intricate social hierarchy. It's not about attracting a man, but about outcompeting his wife. Then, a third, more modern and complex idea begins to form. It's a thought that feels almost rebellious. What if the corset is not for men, or for other women, but for you in a world where you have so little control you cannot vote? You cannot own property in your own name after marriage. Your education is limited. Your professional opportunities are virtually non-existent. Your body is one of the few domains where you can exert a kind of radical personal control. The act of tight-lacing, of sculpting your own flesh into a deliberate, artificial shape, could be seen as an act of agency. It's a form of body modification, a way of making an artistic statement with the only medium you truly own. It is you, not society, who is the artist, and your torso is the canvas. This is a deeply challenging idea, because it reframes an instrument of oppression as a potential to love empowerment. Historians and feminist scholars have been debating this for decades. Was the corset a patriarchal cage, a device imposed by men to hobble women and turn them into decorative objects? Was it a matriarchal tool, used by women to enforce social norms upon one another, or was it a more personal, ambiguous subject, which could be subverted by the wearer as an act of self-expression? There is no single answer, and the truth likely contains elements of all three. Its function and meaning probably shifted from woman to woman, from day to day. You look at the sampler you are stitching. It's a complex pattern of flowers and vines. You are following a chart, placing each colored thread precisely where it needs to go to create a beautiful, orderly image. You look down at your own torso. The corset, too, is creating a beautiful, orderly image, forcing your body to conform to a pre-designed pattern. Are you the stitcher? Or are you the fabric being stitched? This is the question that lies at the heart of it all. You don't have an answer. You suspect no one does. You take a shallow, familiar breath, and continue to sew. A perfectly composed lady in a perfectly constructed cage, wondering who holds the key. In the quiet, orderly world you inhabit, there are certain topics that are never, ever discussed in polite company. One of the most significant of these is personal hygiene. It is a subject shrouded in euphemism and deliberate ignorance. This cone of silence extends to your undergarments, and most particularly to your corset. You are beginning to confront a rather pungent and uncomfortable reality. Your corset is not very clean. Think about it. You wear this garment every single day, for at least 12 hours a day. It is pressed directly against your body, separated only by a thin cotton chemise. You are living, breathing human being. You perspire, especially in stuffy, crowded rooms or during the warmest summer months. That perspiration, along with skin oils and dead skin cells, is absorbed by the fabric of the chemise, but also, inevitably, by the corset itself. And here is the problem: a corset is fiendishly difficult to clean. You can't simply toss it into a tub with soap and water. The complex construction of coautile, steel, and hollow bone makes it a laundry nightmare. Submerging it in water could cause the steel stays to rust, staining the fabric with ugly brown streaks and weakening the metal over time. The hollow bone, being a natural, porous material, could warp, soften, or even begin to rot if it became waterlogged. Aggressive scrubbing could damage the delicate stitching or the fabric itself. So how were they cleaned? The answer, for the most part, is that they weren't. Not thoroughly, anyway. Daily maintenance involved airing the corset out overnight, hopefully near an open window. If it became soiled, one might try to spot clean it with a damp cloth and a bit of gentle soap or perhaps some benzene to remove a greasy stain. But a full, deep cleaning was a rare and risky event. Most women owned 2 or 3 corsets, which they would rotate to allow each one to air out. But this did little to address the cumulative buildup of grime. You become acutely, personally aware of this on a hot August afternoon. You can smell it, a faint, slightly sour, personal odor that emanates from the core of your being. You hope no one else can detect it, but the fear that they might is a new source of social anxiety. Your chemise is washed daily, of course, but the corset itself has begun to take on a permanent, lingering scent of you. It's a deeply personal, slightly shameful secret. This lack of hygiene had real health consequences that are often overlooked. A perpetually damp, dirty garment worn tightly against the skin is a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and fungi. This could lead to a host of unpleasant skin conditions, from rashes and chafing known euphemistically as fretting to more serious fungal infections and abscesses, particularly under the bust or in the armpits where moisture collected. It's a little known, unglamorous detail, but body lice and other pests could also find a happy home in the seams of an unwashed corset. Doctors of the period occasionally wrote about these dermatological complaints, but it was not a subject for polite discussion. The historical debate here isn't about if corsets weren't sanitary. They undoubtedly were by modern standards, but about how the Victorians themselves perceived it. Did they simply have a higher tolerance for smells and a different standard of cleanliness to some extent? Yes, the world before universal indoor plumbing and powerful detergents was a smellier place in general. However, the Victorian era was also a time of burgeoning public health awareness and a growing obsession with purity, both moral and physical. This created a profound contradiction. The very garment that was supposed to signal a woman's purity and refinement was, in reality, often a rather unhygienic object. This cognitive dissonance was resolved by simply not talking about it, by pretending the problem didn't exist. One day, while tidying a drawer, you come across your very first corset, the one you wore during your seasoning period. You haven't worn it in years. You take it out and hold it up. The fabric is yellowed and stained under the arms. It has a distinct, musty smell, the ghost of your own teenage perspiration locked in its fibers. You look at this object, this relic of your own past, and you are struck by the immense gap between the pristine, elegant ideal of the corseted lady and the grubby, slightly smelly reality of the garment itself. It is a perfect metaphor for the era beautiful, polished surface hiding a more complicated and less pleasant truth. You quietly fold the old corset and put it back in the drawer, burying the secret once again. Tonight is the night of the grand annual ball at the Cavendish estate, the most important social event of the season. This is not a night for your everyday corset or a simple day dress. This is a night for the full, glorious, and utterly exhausting panoply of formal evening wear. The process of getting ready is not a simple matter of choosing a dress. It is a multi-stage construction project, and you are the foundation upon which it is built. The ritual begins in the late afternoon, hours before you are due to leave. It starts, as always, with the base layers. You stand in your chemise and a fresh pair of drawers loose, bifurcated garments that are the precursor to modern panties. Over this, Sarah helps you into your finest evening corset. This one is different from your day-to-day model. It's made of pale pink satin, not sturdy couture. It's designed for maximum impact, meaning it's laced even more tightly than usual, pushing your bust higher and cinching your waist to its absolute minimum for the evening. The goal is not comfort or practicality, but pure aesthetic perfection for a few short hours. Once you are laced in, the layering begins in earnest. The next item is the corset cover, a simple cotton or silk bodice that goes over the corset to smooth out any lines from the bust corset and to protect your dress from the, let's face it, not perfectly clean corset itself. It's a small but essential layer of insulation. Then comes the scaffolding for your skirt. First, the crinoline. In earlier decades, this might have been a heavy cage of steel hoops, but by now, fashion has shifted to the bustle. This is a smaller, but no less absurd, contraption. It's a wire and fabric framework that is tied around your waist and positioned over your rear, designed to push the back of your skirt out into a prominent, shelf-like shape. It makes sitting a logistical puzzle, requiring you to perch on the very edge of a chair and artfully arrange your mountain of fabric behind you. Over the bustle and your legs go a series of petticoats. Not one, but several. A plain cotton one first, then one or two more with ruffles and flounces at the hem to help hold the shape of the skirt and create a pleasing rustle as you move. This is a little-known secret of the era. The sound of a woman's clothing was part of her presence. The whisper of silk and the rustle of starched petticoats announced her arrival. The sheer weight of these layers is already significant. You feel like you are wading through deep water. Finally, the dress itself. It's a magnificent creation of emerald green silk, with a low-cut bodice and a train that will require careful navigation all evening. It is, of course, interpieces the bodice and the skirt. The skirt is eased on over the mountain of underpinnings and fastened at your tiny, corseted waist. Then, the bodice, which is boned and structured itself, is put on like a tight jacket and fastened with a dizzying number of tiny hooks and dies up the back. It is so tight across that it feels like a second corset. Your arms are constricted by tight sleeves, your neck and shoulders bare. The final tally of your clothing is staggering chemise, drawers, corset cover, rustle, 3 petticoats, and a 2-piece silk dress. You are wearing at least 9 distinct layers of clothing. The total weight is easily 15 to 20 pounds. You feel less like a person and more like a piece of elaborate, mobile furniture. There's a historical debate about the exact number and weight of these layers. It varied by decade, wealth, and the formality of the occasion. But the consensus is that a formally dressed upper-class Victorian woman was carrying a significant load. This, combined with the restrictive corset, severely limited her mobility and stamina. The image of the delicate flower was, in part, a result of a woman being physically exhausted by the sheer effort of wearing her clothes. You look at yourself in the full-length mirror. The effect is undeniable. You are a work of art. The dress drapes perfectly. Your silhouette is the idealized hourglass shape, taken to its highest form. You look regal, elegant, and completely detached from the comfortable, soft-bodied person you were a few hours ago. But the physical reality is punishing. You are hot. Your breathing is even more shallow than usual. The weight of the skirts pulls on your waist, a constant, dragging pressure. You know that dancing will be an exercise in endurance, and eating will be all but impossible. This is the ultimate expression of conspicuous consumption and leisure. Your clothing makes it physically impossible for you to perform any kind of labor. It announces to the world that you are a creature of pure ornament. As you take one last look in the mirror, you feel a surge of pride at the beautiful image you present, immediately followed by a wave of profound weariness for the long, uncomfortable night ahead. The cage, tonight, is gilded, but it is a cage all the same. As the years wear on and you become a connoisseur of corsetry by necessity, you start to notice a new trend in the advertisements that fill the pages of your favorite ladies' magazines. Amidst the ads for soaps, powders, and a dizzying array of questionable health tonics, there is a growing chorus of corset manufacturers all claiming the same thing: their corset isn't like the others. Theirs is a health corset. This is a masterful stroke of 19th century marketing genius. As a quiet but persistent backlash against the dangers of tight lacing begins to grow in medical and intellectual circles, the corset industry doesn't fight back with defiance. Instead, it co-opts the language of its critics. It reframes the corset not as a tool of fashion, but as a piece of therapeutic, almost medical, equipment. You see advertisements for the health corset, the hygienic corset, or the doctor-approved bodice. These ads are often filled with pseudo-scientific jargon and anatomical diagrams. They claim their revolutionary designs support the viscera, improve posture, and even aid digestion. They boast of flexible stays, ventilated fabrics, and designs that supposedly place no pressure on the delicate internal organs. One particularly popular style was the S-bend or erect form corset, which became fashionable at the turn of the century. It was designed to thrust the hips backward and the bust forward, creating a new, more natural silhouette that was supposedly healthier because it followed the natural curves of the spine. In reality, it forced the spine into an unnatural arch that often led to severe lower back pain. You feel a flicker of hope. Could it be true? Could there be a corset that offers the fashionable shape you need without the fainting spells, indigestion, and breathlessness? You decide to purchase one of these new health models. It arrives in a box covered in reassuring, scientific-looking text. When you put it on, it does feel different. The pressure is distributed in a new way, but after a few hours of wear, You realize it's just a different kind of uncomfortable. The fundamental problem remains, it is a rigid structure designed to reshape your soft body. The health aspect feels more like a slogan than a reality. This era saw an explosion of patented corset designs, each one claiming to have solved the problems of its predecessors. There were corsets made with elastic gussets, corsets with shoulder straps to lift the weight off the hips, and even bizarre electrical corsets that contained magnetized steel stays, which were claimed to cure everything from nervousness to kidney disease by aligning the body's natural electrical currents. This was pure quackery, but it was surprisingly popular. It played into the Victorian fascination with both scientific progress and miracle cures. This is a strange and often forgotten chapter of medical history, the booming completely bogus therapeutic devices. Historians are still trying to determine the true impact of this health corset movement. On one hand, it can be seen as a cynical marketing ploy, a way for manufacturers to sell more products by preying on women's health concerns that were, ironically, caused by their own products. It was a classic case of selling the disease and the cure in the same box. On the other hand, a more generous interpretation is that it represented a genuine, if often misguided, attempt to reform the corset from within. Some designers and manufacturers were likely sincere in their efforts to create a less harmful garment. They were responding to a real market demand from women who were tired of suffering for fashion but were not yet ready to abandon the corset entirely. The health corset represents a crucial turning point in the history of underwear. It shows that the conversation was changing. The unquestioned reign of the purely aesthetic, purely fashionable corset was beginning to crumble. The very fact that health had become a selling point indicates a growing awareness among the female population that their clothing was affecting their well-being. They were starting to question the trade-off. You eventually go back to your traditional, custom-made corset from Madame Du Bois. It may not be a health model, but at least it's a familiar discomfort. The marketing promises of the new corsets feel like a lie, and you prefer the honest cage you know to a new one that pretends to be a health spa. But the seed of an idea has been planted. The notion that comfort and health are things you could, and should, expect from your undergarments is no longer a radical thought. It's an advertised promise, even if it's a hollow one. The health corset may have been a lie, but it was a lie that pointed towards a future where women would demand more than just a perfect silhouette from their clothes. They would start to demand freedom. The whispers of dissent that led to the health corset are beginning to grow into a more confident, public conversation. It's no longer just a few radical thinkers or obscure medical journals. The doctors are starting to speak up, loudly and in unison. Their voices are cutting through the noise of fashion magazines and social etiquette. And their message is simple and alarming: the corset is a danger to public health. You begin to see articles in respectable newspapers and magazines written by prominent physicians. They are no longer hedging their bets with gentle suggestions. They are using stark, unequivocal language. They publish detailed anatomical drawings, often a bit sensationalized for effect, showing the dramatic displacement of internal organs. Livers are shown compressed, stomachs pushed into the chest cavity, intestines crammed into the pelvis. They label these drawings with dire warnings about the long-term consequences: chronic indigestion, infertility, uterine prolapse, and a heightened risk of death during childbirth. They move beyond the internal and point to the external evidence. They document cases of corset liver, where the organ developed deep, permanent grooves from the pressure of the ribs. They present evidence of deformed rib-bridges found in the skeletons of deceased women. They link the high rates of respiratory diseases like tuberculosis in women directly to the restricted lung capacity caused by corseting. The argument is shifting from a matter of comfort to a matter of life and death. You attend a public lecture by a renowned physician, Dr. Alistair Finch. It's a bold and somewhat scandalous thing for a lady of your standing to do, but your curiosity and your years of personal experience compel you. The lecture hall is filled mostly with men, but you see a surprising number of other women, their faces serious and intent. Dr. Finch stands on the stage, and he does not mince words. He holds up a corset. calling it an instrument of slow suicide. He holds up a human skeleton and points to the floating ribs. Nature gave you these for a reason. He booms, his voice echoing in the hall, to protect your vital organs and to allow for the miracle of deep, life-giving breath. And for the sake of a line, a curve dictated by a dressmaker in Paris, you have turned them into a cage that strangles you from within. His words are powerful, and they resonate with a truth you have felt in your own bones for years. The way he medicalizes the issue gives it a new weight and authority. It's no longer a matter of feminine vanity or social competition, it's a public health crisis. Like poor sanitation or contaminated water. This shift in framing is crucial. It takes the blame off the individual woman and places it on the practice itself. This growing medical consensus is a fascinating piece of public health history. It was one of the first times the medical establishment collectively organized to fight against a deeply entrenched social custom. They used the tools of modern science, autopsy findings, statistical analysis, public lectures to wage a campaign against fashion. It was an uphill battle. The corset industry was powerful, and the social pressure on women was immense. Of course, there is still a debate about the true motivations and effects of this medical outcry. Some historians argue that while the health concerns were genuine, the campaign was also colored by a patriarchal desire to control women's bodies. The arguments often carried a subtext: stop this foolish, feminine nonsense and listen to us, the rational men of science. They sometimes framed the desire for a small waist as a form of female hysteria or moral failing. The campaign to free women from the corset was, in some ways, another attempt to tell them what to do with their bodies. There was also a less scientific, but equally passionate, group of critics, the moralists and religious leaders. They began to preach against the corset from the pulpit, arguing that it was a symbol of vanity and worldly temptation. They claimed that deforming the body God gave you was a sin. They pointed to the corset's role in accentuating the bust and hips, calling it a provocative garment designed to incite lust, not a symbol of modesty. So, you find yourself in a bizarre crossfire. One group is telling you the corset is an emblem of virtuous restraint, while another is yelling that it's a licentious to love the devil. You leave Dr. Finch's lecture feeling profoundly unsettled. The secret, private discomforts you have endured for so long are now public knowledge. A topic of scientific debate and moral condemnation. The cage has been exposed. The world is starting to see the bars. The medical arguments give you a new language to understand your own experience. It's not just you being delicate, it's your diaphragm being immobilized. It's not just indigestion, it's your stomach being physically compressed. The doctor's voices provide a powerful, external validation for a truth you've long felt internally. The tide is turning. The pressure to conform is still immense. But for the first time, you feel a flicker of justification, a sense of righteous indignation. The foundation of the corset's tyranny is beginning to crack. The doctor's warnings and the moralist's sermons create the intellectual foundation for change. But the real rebellion starts with a handful of brave, often ridiculed, women. You begin to hear about the dress reform movement. It's a small, fringe group, mostly composed of suffragists, female doctors, artists, and progressive thinkers. They are not just asking for a healthier corset, they are questioning the very foundation of female fashion. They are committing the radical act of dressing for comfort and freedom. Their most famous and controversial creation is the bloomer. You see drawings of it in satirical magazines, where it's depicted as a scandalous, unfeminine absurdity. It consists of a loose-fitting tunic worn over a pair of voluminous trousers, gathered at the ankle. It's named after one of its most famous advocates, Amelia Bloomer. To your eyes, conditioned by decades of skirts and petticoats, it looks bizarre, but when you really think about it, the logic is undeniable. It allows for a full range of motion. A woman in bloomers could walk briskly, climb stairs with ease, and even run if she needed to. To wear bloomers in public is an act of social suicide for a woman of your standing. It is to invite ridicule, scorn, and accusations of being a strong-minded woman, which is not a compliment. The women who wear them are pioneers, and they pay the price. They are heckled on the street. Children throw stones at them. They are denied entry to establishments. But they persist. They argue that women cannot achieve political or intellectual equality while they are physically hobbled by their clothing. How can you fight for the vote when you can barely climb the stairs to the lecture hall? But the dress reform movement was about more than just bloomies. They advocated for a whole system of rational dress. The core principle was that the weight of clothing should be suspended from the shoulders, not hung from a constricted waist. They designed emancipation waists or liberty bodices, which were soft, unstructured undergarments, often made of wool flannel, that buttoned up the front. They had no steel or hollow bone. They were designed to provide warmth and modesty without restricting breathing or movement. They were, in essence, the ancestors of the modern camisolo and bra. You secretly order one of these liberty bodices from a reformist catalogue. It arrives in a plain brown paper package. You try it on one afternoon when you are alone in the house. The feeling is revolutionary. It's soft. It's warm. It follows the natural shape of your body. You take a deep, profound belly breath, the first you've taken while wearing a bodice in 20 years. You stretch your arms above your head. You bend at the waist. The freedom is so complete, so exhilarating, it almost makes you cry. You wear it for an hour, walking around your room, marveling at the simple, forgotten pleasure of unrestricted movement. Then, with a sigh, you take it off and hide it at the back of a drawer. You are not brave enough to wear it out of the house. Not yet. A lesser known but equally important part of this movement was the focus on footwear. Reformers railed against the impractical, often heeled and pointed-toe shoes that were fashionable for women. They advocated for sensible, flat, comfortable shoes that didn't deform the foot. They understood that freedom of movement started from the ground up. This holistic approach from the feet to the underwear to the outer layers was what made the movement so radical. The historical debate around the dress reform movement often centers on its success, or lack thereof. In the short term, it was largely a failure. Mainstream society rejected bloomers and other radical garments as ugly and unfeminine. The movement was associated with fringe elements like suffragists and socialists, which made it easy for the establishment to dismiss. However, its long-term impact was immense. It was the first time that the concepts of comfort and health were presented as the primary goals of fashion. It planted the seeds of an idea that would take decades to fully blossom, the idea that women could, and should, choose what they wear based on their own needs, not on the dictates of an abstract, oppressive ideal. These dress reformers were the intellectual and sartorial ancestors of the flappers of the 1922s and the feminists of the 1962s. They were the first to articulate the powerful connection between clothing and liberation. You think about the soft liberty bodice hidden in your drawer. It's a secret, a promise of a different kind of life. The reformers on the street may be mocked, but in the quiet of your room, you know they are right. You have tasted freedom, and the familiar cage of your corset now feels more constricting than ever before. The rebellion has begun, not just in the streets, but in the hearts and minds and hidden in the drawers of women just like you. The world is changing in ways that have nothing to do with fashion, but which will end up sealing the corset's fate. A new invention has appeared, a contraption of metal, rubber, and gears that is capturing the public imagination: the safety bicycle. At first, it's a novelty for daring young men, but soon, designs are adapted for women, with a lower crossbar to accommodate skirts. And with that, a revolution begins to roll, quietly at first, down the paved paths of city parks and country lanes. Your husband, always one for modern trends, buys one for you. It sits on the veranda, gleaming and strange. It looks like a promise of speed and movement. You are intrigued and terrified. Your first attempts are a comedy of errors. You, in your long skirts and corseted torso, are simply not equipped for this. The rigid posture that is so prized in the drawing room is a liability on a bicycle, which requires a degree of balance and core engagement you no longer possess. Your skirts threaten to get caught in the chain, and the sheer exertion of pedaling leaves you gasping for air within minutes, your constricted lungs screaming for oxygen. It seems impossible. But then you see other women riding. They are wearing a new kind of outfit, a cycling costume. It's a compromise between fashion and function. The skirts are shorter, often ankle length or even calf length, which is scandalous in itself. Underneath, many of them are wearing a form of divided skirt or even bloomers, which gives them the freedom to pedal without entanglement. And most importantly, you notice that their posture is different. It's more relaxed, slightly forward-leaning. They are not wearing their tightest, most restrictive formal coat. Some of them may have switched to a more flexible sporting corset, but many are rumored to be wearing nothing more than one of those Liberty bodices you have hidden in your drawer. Thus is the key. The bicycle demands a freedom that the corset simply will not allow. It is a direct, physical confrontation between the old world of static, ornamental femininity and a new world of active, mobile womanhood. You cannot be a decorative statue and a cyclist at the same time. You have to choose. Driven by a desire not to be left behind, you make a choice. You retrieve the Liberty bodice from its hiding place. You put on a shorter skirt, one of your older ones that you don't mind getting dusty, and you try again. The difference is night and day. You can breathe. You can engage your weakened core muscles to help you balance. You can lean forward over the handlebars. After a few wobbly starts, you are rolling. You are moving under your own power, faster than you have ever moved before without a horse and carriage. The wind is in your face, a feeling you haven't truly experienced since you were a child. It is pure, unadulterated exhilaration. The bicycle craze of the 1892 was more than just a new hobby. It was a powerful engine for social change. For the first time, a woman of your class had a socially acceptable reason to be active, to be outdoors, to travel independently. She could leave the house without a chaperone, simply to go for a ride. This newfound mobility had a profound psychological impact. It gave women a sense of agency and physical competence that had been systematically denied to them. The suffragist Susan B. Anthony famously said that the bicycle had done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. There's a fascinating, and still debated, historical question here: did the bicycle kill the corset, or was the corset already dying, and the bicycle simply delivered the final, decisive blow? Many historians argue that the forces of dress reform, medical criticism, and a general shift towards more active lifestyles were already weakening the corset's hold. The bicycle was the catalyst, the activity that made the absurdity of the traditional corset undeniable. It provided a practical and fun reason to abandon it. There is a charming, little-known aspect of this revolution the bicycle face. This was a supposed medical condition that doctors warned about, claiming that the strain of balancing and the constant wind on the face would lead to a permanent expression of anxiety and exhaustion. It was, of course, complete nonsense, a last-ditch attempt by a nervous patriarchy to discourage women from taking to their wheels. It failed spectacularly. Women were having too much fun to be scared off by silly scaramouches. You ride further and further from home each day. You discover paths you never knew existed. You feel your leg muscles growing stronger, your balance improving. You feel your core, that long dormant part of you, waking up. You are breathing deeply, your lungs filling with fresh air. You are a body in motion, a body that works. When you come home, tired and happy, and you see your formal corset lying on the bed, it looks like a relic from another lifetime. It looks like a prison you have just escaped. The world is opening up, and you are rolling, freely and breathlessly, into the 20th century. The new century dawns, full of technological marvels and social change. The bicycle has given you a taste of freedom, and you, along with millions of other women, are not willing to go back. The extremely tight, hourglass figure corset is already beginning to look a bit old-fashioned. A relic of your mother's generation, fashion is moving towards a straighter, more natural line, but the corset, in a slightly modified, less aggressive form, still persists. It takes a global cataclysm to finally shatter its foundations. In 1914, the world goes to war. The Great War changes everything. As the men march off to the trenches in France, a vast void is left in the workforce at home. The factories, the farms, the transportation systems, they all need workers to keep the country running and to support the war effort. For the first time in history, women are called upon to fill these roles on an unprecedented scale. They pour out of their homes and into jobs that were once considered exclusively male. You find yourself volunteering. Perhaps you work in a munitions factory, assembling shells. Perhaps you become a conductor on an omnibus. Or you work the land as part of the Women's Land Army. Whatever the job, it involves physical labor. It involves long hours on your feet. It involves bending, lifting, stretching, and moving in ways that are simply, utterly incompatible with a traditional corset. You can't operate a lathe while encased in steel and hollow bone. You can't lift a heavy crate when you can't take a deep breath. The corset, for centuries the symbol of a woman's respectable, maished status, suddenly becomes the symbol of something else in practicality. It is a hindrance to the war effort. It is unpatriotic, in a world where every resource is precious. The materials used to make corsets specifically, the steel are deemed essential for military use. In a famous, though possibly apocryphal, story, the U.S. War Industries Board in 1917 asked women to stop buying corsets, claiming that the metal saved some 28 tons of it was enough to build 2 battleships. Whether the battleship story is literally true or not, it captures the spirit of the time. The corset was suddenly seen as a frivolous, wasteful luxury from a bygone era. Women, liberated by the necessity of work, happily abandoned them. They switched to the simpler, softer liberty bodices or other unstructured undergarments that allowed them to do their jobs. And as they did, they experienced a collective, mass-scale physical liberation that the dress reformers could only have dreamed of. This period saw a rapid evolution in underwear. The need for something that offered a bit of support for the bust, but without the rigid structure of a corset, became urgent. This is where you see the proliferation of garments that look much more like the modern bra. They were simple, curved, and designed to separate and support the breasts, rather than hoisting them up on a corseted shelf. There is a historical debate about who truly invented the modern bra. Several patents were filed around this time. A French designer named Herminie Caudal had introduced a 2-part undergarment called the Binetta Wellbeing as early as 1889, where the top part functioned as a bra. But the woman most often credited with creating the first commercially successful modern bra is an American socialite named Mary Phelps Jacob, later known as Horace Crosby. In 1914, preparing for a debutante ball, she grew frustrated with how her corset's hollow-bone stays poked out from her sheer evening gown. With her maid, she fashioned a new undergarment out of 2 silk handkerchiefs, some pink ribbon, and thread. It was soft, lightweight, and it worked. Her friends all wanted one, and she soon patented her backless brassiere. The war, with its demand for metal and its push for more practical women's wear, created the perfect market for her invention. The war ends, and the world is irrevocably changed. The men who return come back to women who are also different. They have experienced economic and physical independence. They have cut their hair short for practicality. Their clothes are simpler. Their skirts are shorter. They have proven that they can do men's work. The idea of forcing them back into the restrictive, ornamental clothing of the pre-war era seems not just old-fashioned, but ludicrous. You stand in your bedroom after a long day of work. You are tired, but it's a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from purpose and effort. You are not wearing a corset. You haven't worn one in years. You look at your body in the mirror. It's no longer the perfect hourglass of your youth. Your waist is its natural size. Your posture is your own. You are no longer a sculpture. You're just a person. The ruhr, in its terrible and destructive way, has given you a gift you never expected. It has broken your cage. The war is over, and the roaring 20s have begun. It's a new world, a new era of jazz, automobiles, and social upheaval. The most dramatic invisible symbol of this new era is the flapper. She is everything the corseted Victorian lady was not. Her hair is cut into a short, boyish bob. Her skirts are scandalously short, rising to the knee. She smokes, she drinks, she dances with wild abandon, and under her loose, straight-cut, drop-waist dress, she is not wearing a corset. The aesthetic ideal has been completely inverted. The exaggerated, feminine hourglass shape that defined your youth is now seen as fussy, old-fashioned, unmatronly. The new ideal is a boyish, androgynous silhouette, a flat chest, a non-existent waist, and narrow hips are now the height of fashion. The corset, the ultimate tool for creating curves, has become obsolete. It has been dethroned. But what replaced it, the corset, did not simply vanish. It underwent a kind of cellular division. It split into two distinct, separate garments that would define 20th century underwear: the brassiere and the girdle. You watch your own daughter, a young woman of this new generation, getting ready for an evening out. The process is a world away from the elaborate construction project of your own youth. First, she puts on a brassiere. It's a simple, band-like garment, often made of silk or cotton, designed not to lift and separate, but to flatten the chest to achieve the fashionable boyish look. These early bras were a far cry from the engineered lingerie of the later 20th century. Their primary goal was suppression, not enhancement. Then, instead of a steel-bound corset, she might step into a girdle. This was the direct descendant of the lower half of the corset. It was typically a boneless, elasticated garment that ran from the waist to the top of the thighs. Its purpose was to smooth the hips and stomach, creating a slim, straight line under the drop-waist dresses. For evening wear, she would roll on a pair of silk stockings, which were now held up not by garters hanging from a corset, but by a garter belt, which was either a separate item or attached to the bottom of the girdle. The old tyrant, the one-piece corset that controlled the entire torso, had been broken apart. Its functions were now divided between these two new, more specialized, and slightly less restrictive garments. This separation was a revolution. It allowed for a new freedom of movement at the waist. A woman could now bend, twist, and dance the Charleston without a rigid steel busk preventing her. It was a partial, but significant, liberation. There is a fascinating historical debate about this transition. Was the move to the bra girdle a true liberation for women, or was it simply a new form of conformity? Swapping one artificial silhouette for another, some historians and feminist scholars argue that while the new undergarments were less physically damaging than the Victorian corset, they still served the same fundamental purpose: to mold a woman's natural body into a fashionable, artificial shape. The ideal had changed from an hourglass to a tube, but the pressure to conform to an ideal remained. Women were still being asked to suppress and reshape their bodies, just in a different way. You see this in the advertisements of the day. They no longer promote tiny waists, but they trumpet the virtues of a slim, youthful figure and the necessity of a girdle to control any unseemly curves. The language has changed, but the underlying message of bodily dissatisfaction is still there. A quirky, forgotten element of this transition is the transitional garment. For a brief period, you could buy undergarments that were a strange hybrid of the old and the new: a long-line bra that extended down to the waist, with a few light bones, or a corset, which was a one-piece combination of a soft bra and a light girdle. These were for the woman who wasn't quite ready to give up the feeling of all-over support, a kind of sartorial security blanket. You look at your own undergarments now. You've adopted the new style, of course. You wear a comfortable, simple brassiere and, on occasion, a light girdle. The freedom, compared to what you wore for the first half of your life, is astonishing. You can breathe, you can eat, You can move. Yet, you are still wearing a foundation garment. You are still shaping yourself, albeit more gently, to fit the clothes. The corset is gone, but its ghost remains. Its DNA has been passed down to its children, the bra and the girdle, which will go on to shape the lids and bodies of women for the rest of an entire century. The great dictator has been overthrown, but the new democracy of underwear still has its own set of rules. The years continue to pass. The Roaring Twenties give way to the Great Depression, then another world war, and then the bustling prosperity of the post-war era. You are an old woman now. You have witnessed a century of unimaginable change. You sit in a comfortable armchair, one that you can truly sink into, and watch your granddaughter getting ready to go out. She's a modern woman of the 1952s. The boyish flapper look is long gone, replaced by the new look. A silhouette that is, in a strange twist of irony, a direct echo of your own youth, a full bust, a tiny, waspish waist, and of a luminous, flowing skirt. The hourglass has returned, but the underpinnings are different. Your granddaughter isn't wearing a corset of steel and hollow bone. She is wearing a complex concoction of nylon, elastic, and strategically placed spiral boning. She wears a long line bra with circular stitching to create a pointed, conical bust shape. Below that, a formidable girdle cord was 5 inches her waist, achieving that desirable tiny circumference through the power of modern elastic fabrics rather than brute force lacing. It is, in essence, a high-tech corset. The goal is the same, but the technology has changed. One day, out of a sense of nostalgia or perhaps a desire to show your granddaughter a piece of her own history, you go up to the attic. In a dusty old trunk, you find it. It's one of your old corsets, the one you wore as a young married woman. The satin is yellowed, but the structure is still sound. You hold it in your hands. It feels both heavy and fragile, a relic from a lost civilization. The steel busk is cold to the touch. You run your fingers over the rigid channels that once housed hollowbone stays. On a whim, you decide to try it on. It's a struggle. You are out of practice. You stand in your chemise and wrap it around your older, softer body. You can barely fasten the front busk. You don't even attempt to lace it tight. You just pull the laces snug enough to hold it in place. And then you feel it. That old, familiar, suffocating pressure. The instantaneous straightening of your spine. The impossibility of a deep breath. It's like a physical memory. A ghost limb. All the sensations come rushing back, the feeling of being encased. The dull ache in your ribs. The sense of being both supported and imprisoned. You look at yourself in the dusty attic mirror. You see a ghost, the ghost of the young woman you once were, trapped inside the body of the old woman you have become. After a minute, you can't stand it. You fumble with the laces, unhook the busk, and pull the thing off, gasping as if you just surfaced from underwater. You leave the corset in the trunk and go back downstairs. You sit in your comfortable chair and you close your eyes. And for the first time, you truly, fully appreciate the feeling of your own body. Unconstrained, the simple, profound miracle of it. The ability to take a deep, satisfying breath that fills your entire belly. The way your body can slump and relax when it's tired. The freedom to bend down and pick something up without a second thought. These are small, everyday luxuries that you once paid for with years of your life. The historical debate about the corset's legacy continues. But for you, it is no longer a debate. It is a lived experience. Was it a tool of oppression? Yes. Was it a symbol of status? Yes. Was it, in its own strange way, a part of your identity also? Yes. It shaped your body, but it also shaped your life, your movements, your interactions, your understanding of the world. To deny its importance would be to deny a part of your own history. This is the ultimate liberation. It's not just the absence of the corset, it's the conscious appreciation of that absence. It's the knowledge of what it felt like to be caged that makes freedom so sweet. You've spent a lifetime learning the language of restriction. Kendall, in your final years, you are fluent in the language of release. Your body, with its aches and wrinkles, its natural, unsinged waste, is finally, completely, your own. It bears the invisible marks of its past, but it is no longer bound by them. You are no longer a sculpture, no longer an ornament. You are simply you are, breathing freely. You are standing in a modern department store. The lighting is bright. The air is clean and temperature controlled. Music plays softly from hidden speakers. It's a world away from the dusty, serious shop of Madame Dubois. You are in the lingerie section, a vast landscape of lace and silk in every color imaginable. You look at the racks of brass, engineered with underwires, foam padding, and adjustable straps. You see panties in a dozen different cuts, from high-waisted briefs to tiny thongs. You see shapewear, the modern-day descendants of the girdle, made from high-tech, seamless microfiber, promising to smooth, lift, and sculpt with all-day comfort. You run your hand over a piece of shapewear. It's light, soft, and incredibly stretchy. It bears little physical resemblance to the heavy, rigid corset of your youth. And yet, the language used to sell it is eerily familiar. It promises to fix your flaws, to give you a better shape under your clothes, to make you more confident, more beautiful. It whispers the same old story: your natural body is not quite good enough. It needs to be molded, controlled, and improved. You look in the three-way mirror in the sitting room, a device of ruthless modern efficiency. You see your reflection, and in it, you see the ghosts of 100 years of fashion. You see the ghost of the S-bend corset in the way a woman might arch her back to look better in a photo. You see the ghost of the flapper's fattening bandeau and the desire for an athletic or androgynous physique. You see the ghost of the 1950 seconds was pie in the modern waist trainers that influencers promote on social media. Bizarre, brightly colored corsets worn on the outside of clothes during a workout. The corset itself is gone from mainstream life. It has been relegated to the worlds of historical costume, niche fetish communities, and high-fashion fantasy. A designer might put a corset on a runway model to evoke a sense of historical drama or edgy sexuality, but no one expects you to wear one to the office. The physical object is a museum piece. But its ghost, its central idea, is more pervasive than ever. The pressure to have a flat stomach, a firm bust, a thigh gap, a rounded bottom, the ideal silhouette changes, but the pressure to achieve an ideal remains. The tools have just become more sophisticated. Instead of hollowbone and steel, you have diets, Photoshop, cosmetic surgery, and a relentless 24-hour cycle of media images showing you what you should look like. The external cage has been replaced by an internal one, a cage of insecurity and comparison. There's a great historical irony that scholars often discuss. The Victorians were accused of being prudish and repressive, hiding the body under layers of clothing. Yet, in their own way, they were intensely focused on the body, on shaping and molding it into an extreme, artificial form. Today, we live in a culture that seems to celebrate the body, with more skin exposed than ever before. Yet we are still trying to force it into an equally narrow, and often equally artificial, set of ideals. The tyranny of the silhouette continues. You think back on your long life. You wore the corset because it was the only option. It was the price of admission to society. Your granddaughter wore her girdle and pointy bra to fit the fashion of her time. Your great-granddaughter scrolls through her phone, comparing her own body to 1,000 filtered, curated images. Each generation has its own cage. The shape and the materials change. But the feeling of being measured and found wanting is a constant thread. You leave the lingerie department and walk through the store. You see a young woman in yoga pants and a t-shirt. Her body unconstrained, comfortable, and free. And for a moment, you feel a surge of hope. Maybe things really have changed. But then you see another woman struggling with a pair of super skinny jeans. A modern garment that can be just as restrictive as any corset. The legacy is complicated. The ghost of the corset is in the mirror, in the magazines, in the way we look at ourselves and at each other. It is a faint, spectral outline, a reminder of a time when women were literally crushed into shape, and a quiet question that hangs in the air: how much really has changed you have lived through this struggle? And you know that the quest for liberation, for the right to simply be, in whatever shape you happen to have, is a story that is still being written. The afternoon sun slants through the window, painting a warm, golden rectangle on the floor. The memories of the store, of the coasts both old and new, begin to soften and fade, like a dream upon waking. The faint scent of dust from the attic and the sharp smell of ammonia from a long-ago fainting spell recede into the quiet hum of the present. You feel the gentle weight of your own body in the chair, the soft fabric of your simple dress, the easy, unrestricted rise and fall of your own breath. These simple sensations are a profound comfort, a quiet luxury that you have earned over a lifetime. The ghosts of the past are no longer haunting, they are just stories now, threads woven into the rich, complex fabric of your life. The world outside the window continues its hurried pace, but in here, in this quiet room, there is a deep and abiding peace. Your eyes feel heavy, the light in the room softens, and the rhythm of your breathing becomes slow and deep and even. You are drifting now, floating on a calm sea, far from the shores of memory. The cage is gone. The laces are undone. The long day is over, and it is finally time to rest. The end of the article. Good night.